Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's your Uncle Weezy here, coming to you with another advanced stats breakdown. I want to go in depth on the Ponzinibbio Baeza fight that's coming up for UFC Vegas 28, June 5th. This is going to be on the main card. It's going to be a really good fight. This is really exciting. There's a lot of stuff to go through here. Before we get into that, I want to do a couple things first. I want to thank everybody who's been watching my videos. I just started making videos in earnest this week, and the response has been fantastic. I'm over the moon just about how many views they've gotten, how many likes. I want to thank each and every one of you that's come to my channel, that's watched my videos, that's liked, that's subscribed. I continue to plan to provide this kind of content for you, and hopefully you'll keep coming back. I also want to send a shout out to my man Big Brady, DFS by the Numbers. He had me on Pub Sports Radio, shout out Pub Sports Radio, Tuesday night to do a live stream on the DraftKings possibilities for this card coming up. We talked for about an hour and 20 minutes about it. It was a lot of fun. Wanted to thank him for having me on. I wanted to thank Pub Sports Radio for having me on. Go check out Pub Sports Radio channel. And you can see that video if you haven't checked it out yet. It's a lot of good information in there. And let's see, what else do I want to go through here? Yeah, let's get into the numbers here for Ponzinibbio Baeza. If it seems like I don't have that usual fire today, if it seems like I'm a bit melancholy, I am. And it's because the Fierro-Moroz fight got canceled, and I had bets on Fierro, and like most of you guys, I have a 100% win rate on all my tickets that got voided. So I definitely would have won that bet. I mean, and everybody who had the Moroz tickets, they would have won their bet too. I mean, they were all right as well. But that was like half my action on this card. So now I'm left looking at these fights, and now that I've lost half the action that I had down, I've got to figure out some other. I got to figure out some other angles here. And the Ponzinibbio Baeza fight was one I didn't really have a strong lean on one way or another. But both of these guys have enough fights in the UFC that I figured maybe what we could do is we could kind of like go through this together, and maybe we can find a lean one way or the other. If you haven't made up your mind on this fight yet, or even if you have and you just kind of want to take a look at the stats, I wanted to go through them with you here and see if we can find a lean in this fight. So like I always do, let's start with the tail of the tape. We've got Miguel Baeza, the younger fighter here by 6 years. He is 2 inches taller, has a 1 inch reach advantage. He's fighting out of MMA Masters in Florida and ATT in Florida for Ponzinibbio. So obviously Baeza younger, taller, and a 1 inch reach advantage. So, the tail of the tape definitely favors Baeza. Pro experience. Obviously Santiago Ponzinibbio has got a strong advantage in pro experience. 31 pro fights for Ponz to 10 for Baeza. 27-4 record for Santiago Ponzinibbio. Man, is that impressive. 215 minutes of professional cage time, 6.94 minutes per fight, and a 12-year career for Ponz. Now, about half that for Baeza. He's got about a 6-year career. Average fight time about the same overall. And he's got about 1/3 of the experience, of the professional experience in terms of fights and in terms of cage time as Ponzinibbio. Now, in the UFC, we got Baeza with 4 fights. I'm counting the Contender Series fight. And we got Ponzinibbio with 12. Prior to Ponzinibbio's layoff, he was 9-2 in the UFC. He's now 9-3 after getting knocked out by Lee in the first round earlier this year. Miguel Baeza is still undefeated. And obviously we're going to have Ponzinibbio with a cage time advantage as well. So, when we look at just the measurables here in the career experience, we can see that Baeza obviously younger, and Ponzinibbio, because he's older, he does have that experience advantage. He's got more fights, he's got more knockouts, all that stuff. He's just done more of it. He's seen more than Baeza, and he's fought the better level of competition. But we'll get into the level of competition a little bit later on here. Let's go to the finish stats. We can look at them here, or I can actually take you over to the advanced stats model. This is the advanced stats model that's available on DFS by the Numbers Patreon. So if you aren't on that, you got to get on that. $10 a month, you get all of Big Brady's content, and in addition to that, you get the advanced stats model here that I provide, which basically has a player card with a ton of stats on every fighter. Here's Ponzinibbio, and I've got it for every fighter on the card. There's Baeza. We've got offense and defense. These are all the defensive numbers for Baeza, and these are all the offensive numbers for Baeza. And we got it for every fighter on the card, but we can kind of look through here. Let's look at the finish stats. Santiago Ponzinibbio in the UFC. This middle column here is UFC. We see he's got 12 fights, 5 wins by KO, no wins by sub for a 56% finish rate. And in his 3 losses, he has been finished 2 times, both of them by KO. So 67% of his losses, he's been knocked out. And if we go down to Baeza's finish numbers in the UFC, we see that he has a 75% finish rate in his wins, 50% by KO, 25% by sub, and he's never lost. So since he is a knockout artist, and since Ponzinibbio has been knocked out, there's definitely a path to victory there for knockout victory for Baeza. And it's the same thing going the other way around. Ponzinibbio's got tremendous power. We'll look at the striking stats here in a second, but I just wanted to kind of go through the finish stats here because I like them a little bit better on the advanced stats model on Brady's website than I do here on the matchup stats, because I'm trying to get all the information on one page here in the matchup stats. So that's the finish stats. Both of these guys prolific finishers, and Ponzinibbio in his losses has been finished 2/3 of the time in the UFC and 75% of the time overall, all of them by knockout. Okay, let's go over to the striking and grappling statistics here. Let me just get a quick sip of water. So we've got a lot of data here for Ponzinibbio, obviously. These numbers do tell a tale. 4.21 significant strikes per minute landed out of 10.51 offered. That's a lot of volume. He's got a 40.3% striking accuracy. His knockdowns per significant strikes landed is 1.84%, very good. And we see that he gets 1.16 knockdowns per 15 minutes. Very, very good for the welterweight division. And then if we move over to Baeza here, we see 4.64 strikes landed per minute out of 8.31 for a 55% striking accuracy. Very, very accurate striker. This is the number that really pops off the page here. A 2.89% significant strike. He gets a knockdown per significant strike landed 2.89% of the time. That means about once every, 35, 36, 37 strikes, this guy's landing a knockdown. That's crazy, for 2.01 knockdowns per 15 minutes. So with Baeza and Ponzinibbio, we see Ponzinibbio's got a volume edge, Baeza's got a power edge and an accuracy edge, but Baeza's power numbers have been crazy. But we need to pump the brakes on that just a little bit, because if we look at the level of competition, it's not nearly as high as Ponzinibbio. We would probably see some regression back towards the mean as Baeza climbs the ladder here in the welterweight division and fights tougher and tougher opponents. However, boy, this dude's got serious power. So we cannot, we can't really talk about either of these guys without talking about their power, and they both have it in spades. So that power is going to be a big narrative in this fight. So since both of these guys have so much power, now it's really important to talk about their defensive numbers. And we see that Ponzinibbio absorbs 4.05 strikes per minute out of 11.35. So this is actually kind of interesting. Ponzinibbio's opponents have actually thrown more volume than Ponzinibbio has. And Ponzinibbio's volume and output is elite, 10.51 significant strikes per minute. But his opponents are throwing 11.35. So what we have seen is when Ponzinibbio's fights have been on the feet, they've been very high volume fights. Very exciting fights. I mean, the data kind of... It shows exactly what we see with our eyes when we watch this dude fight, that he's always in exciting fights. And this fight promises to be the same. So we look at Baeza here, 3.89 significant strikes per minute he absorbs out of 7.88. So not only does Baeza outland his opponents, but he also outthrows his opponents. Both good signs. Only a 50% striking defense, though. 50.68% striking defense for Baeza, as compared to 64% striking defense for Ponzinibbio. So if you're looking for a reason to favor Ponzinibbio in the striking, this would probably be one of the data points that would really jump out at you. Not only does he have power, but he's got a much better striking defense against much higher level of competition than Baeza. So that is very impressive. Ponzinibbio, however, the chinnier fighter, having been knocked down on 0.64% of the significant strikes landed against him, he's been knocked down 0.39 times per 15 minutes, while Baeza has never been knocked down in the UFC. However, if you watch the Matt Brown fight, he was definitely in trouble there. He almost got knocked down, and Matt Brown was actually pretty close to finishing that fight. So that could be a little bit deceiving. You know, he's going to be seeing somebody in Ponzinibbio who has a ton of power. So we don't want to say that Baeza doesn't have the ability to be knocked down, because he clearly does, and Ponzinibbio has the power to do it. However, you know, we don't want to ignore the fact that in the less sample size for Baeza, that he has knocked his opponents down more than Ponzinibbio has, and he's been knocked down less than Ponzinibbio has. So he's got the advantage on both sides, offensively and defensively, in the power numbers. However, defensively, in the striking defense, is where Ponzinibbio opens up some eyes and shows us a path to victory by perhaps being the more efficient striker. Not the more efficient striker, but the more efficient defensively. So that's the striking stats. Now, if we look at grappling stats here, we have to look at them through the lens of how much control time both of these gentlemen have racked up in their UFC tenures, right? What is the likelihood that this fight goes to the grappling? So, here we go. Ponzinibbio, 9 takedown attempts in his UFC career, and that's in 12 fights. 4 of them he got for a 44% takedown percentage, not bad. He averages only 0.52 takedowns per 15 minutes, no sub attempts, and only 6% of his time in the UFC, which is a lot of minutes. We can look right over here, actually. 116 minutes of cage time, and he's only controlled his opponent 6% of the time. So maybe about 6 minutes of control time out of 116. And we see the same thing with Baeza, really. Only 5 takedown attempts in the UFC. He's gotten 2 of them, 40%. Takedowns per 15 minutes, a little bit better than Ponzinibbio at 0.8. He does have a submission attempt that was successful. 5.63% control time, though. So we're looking at the same thing here. And now, if we look at the defense, we see that Ponzinibbio has a 60% takedown defense. Not stellar, not horrible. He has been taken down almost 3 times as much as he's taken down his opponent. So even though it does seem that he's way more likely to be taken down than take down his opponent, he's still only been controlled 8.78% of his time. So even the takedowns that have happened against him, and there have been 11 of them, he's only been controlled almost 9% of the time. So maybe about 11 minutes of control time. And for 11 takedowns, we're seeing that his opponents are controlling him less than a minute per takedown that they get against him. So I guess what I'm trying to say here with the grappling stats is, you know, this fight is most likely to be a stand-up affair. Neither one of these guys seems all that interested in getting the fight to the ground. They're both fantastic strikers. They both have a ton of power. And I think they're both way more comfortable on the feet than they are on the ground. This fight looks to be setting up as a striking match for me. If I have to give the grappling advantage to somebody, you know, I guess I'd just say Ponzinibbio, because he's been around longer. He's defended more takedowns. He's gotten 4 as compared to 2, but in much less time for Baeza. So Baeza's probably getting more takedowns, but I don't think either one of these guys is really looking to get the fight to the ground. So the grappling is one of the least important stats for this fight, because I do see it being a stand-up war. But now we got to look at the strength of schedule here. So Ponzinibbio, his opponents have a combined record of 87-49 in the 12 opponents that he's fought. That's their combined UFC record outside of their fights with Santiago Ponzinibbio, for a 7.25-4 record. So 11.33 total fights is the amount of fights that his opponents usually have had in the UFC for a 1.78 ratio. So Baeza's ratio is only 1.21. His opponents have been less experienced, about almost 4 less fights. They have an average record of 4.25 wins and 3.5 losses. So Ponzinibbio is fighting the more experienced fighters and the fighters with a better win-loss ratio. But we already knew that. In the wins, we see that the average opponent for Baeza, it's exactly the same as his overall because he's never lost. So we see that Baeza beats a fighter that has an average UFC record of 4.25 wins and 3.5 losses. One of his wins is against Matt Brown, who had a ton of wins, who had a ton of fights. So outside of his Matt Brown fight, he's really not even fighting experienced UFC fighters. While Ponzinibbio, he's beating guys that have an average record of 7.5 wins and about 4 losses. So a 1.84 win to loss ratio too. So not only is he fighting more experienced fighters, but he's fighting guys with really good records as well. And the average record of the guy who has beaten Santiago Ponzinibbio has a 6.33 wins and 4 loss record, 10.33 average fights for a 1.58 ratio. If we look at the last 5 here, we see that Ponzinibbio has names like Jing Liang, Magny, Mike Perry, Gunnar Nelson, and Nordine Taleb, while Baeza's fighting guys like Sato, Matt Brown, who's towards the end of his career, Hector Aldana, Victor Reina, and Colquhoun. So Baeza 5-0 in his last 5, Ponzinibbio 4-1. So obviously Ponzinibbio fighting the better level of competition. He's the more defensively sound striker. Baeza is the more efficient striker and the more powerful striker. Baeza's younger. Baeza's the slightly better finisher overall. So you have to give Baeza the edge in terms of youth, in terms of power so far, but the power numbers are really pretty close. That's really his advantages. Ponzinibbio's advantage is defensively striking. He's fought a much better level of competition over his career. He's just a little more well-rounded from what we know in terms of his grappling than Baeza. However, neither one of these guys really goes to their grappling that much. So power Baeza, youth Baeza, Ponzinibbio, better level of experience, more defensively sound striking, which is going to be very important in this fight. And he's got a lot of power too. Baeza's path to victory, definitely a knockout win, I would say. And I would say it's the same thing for Ponzinibbio. But we can't talk about this fight without talking about the Ponzinibbio layoff, the health problems that he was having. He had a blood infection, which had him in the hospital. The doctors were telling him that the blood infection was so bad that he may never fight again. He recovered from that, then started training again, was having lower leg pain, found out that he had an infection in his bones as well, had to go deal with a whole bunch of treatment for that. Then he went back, and now he's 34 years old, coming off a 2.5-year layoff, and he gets starched in the first round by Li Jingliang, who hit him with a picture-perfect left hook. That would have slept anybody in the welterweight division. So we can look at it one of two ways. We can look at it that he's coming back, and we're not going to really see the same Ponzinibbio, or that, he just had a long layoff. He got caught with a great left hook. He never really got warmed up. But now that he's shaken off that ring rust, maybe we'll see the old Ponz. So what my advice to you would be is you need to think about what that Ponzinibbio layoff means to you, what you thought of his performance against Lee, because if you really think that at 34 years old, it's too late for him to compete at this level anymore, coming off such serious health problems, coming back from that layoff. Now you're fighting 28-year-olds in Baeza who are on their way up. They're hungrier. You have to really figure out what that means to you, because if you think that was a fluke, then you might want to be on Ponzinibbio here at plus money, because he has similar striking skills as Baeza, and that he's fought the much better level of competition. But on the other side of that, you also have to say to yourself, man, this is a tough ask because he didn't look good against Lee. That was a long layoff, and it's reasonable to think that he's just not the same Santiago Ponzinibbio anymore because of these health problems that he's had. He's not 25. You can't really come back from something like that and think that you're going to be back to 100% again. And Ponzinibbio has already seen a lot of success in the UFC. He's fought a lot of tough fights, a lot of tough fighters, amassed a 9-3 record, which is amazing in the welterweight division. So, which way you're going to go on this fight? I hope that I gave you a lot of numbers to look at here and that I gave you a lot to think about. But I think it really does come down to what you think about Ponzinibbio's layoff, what you think about his health, and whether you think this is the same guy. If you really think that it's not the same guy, you got to be picking Baeza by knockout. If you think that Santiago has those health problems in the rearview mirror and that he's still only 34 and that he just shook off the ring rust in the last one, Lee got lucky, then there's a reasonable expectation that Ponzinibbio at plus money is a good bet as well. I think after doing this video, I've talked myself a little bit into Baeza because I love those power numbers. I love the fact that he's younger. I love the fact that he's hungrier. And I love the fact that he doesn't have any major health problems that he's coming off of here. He's got crazy power. I don't think Ponzinibbio is going to test his grappling at all, which might be his weak point. So I think Baeza is going to be comfortable. I think he probably wins this fight because the health problems for Ponzinibbio do worry me. The layoff worried me. The performance against Lee worried me. And the fact that he's 34 worries me. So I've talked myself into Baeza, but I hope you found the video to be informative, and I hope if you're on the fence about this fight, maybe this video helped you get off the fence and pick one way or another. But I'm gonna pick Baeza. Thank you so much for listening. If you listened all the way through, leave a like. Please subscribe. I'll be doing more and more of these videos. My dog wants you to subscribe too. Listen to him. And good luck on Saturday. Have a good one.